Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, colleagues and friends, to today's session, Science as a Shared Journey, Engaging Communities, Building Trust, and Advancing Open Science for the SDGs. My name is Thanos Giannakopoulos. I'm the Chief Librarian of the United Nations Dag Hammarskjöld Library at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The right to participate in and benefit from science remains fundamental to human progress and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Human development progress is experiencing an unprecedented slowdown according to a new report released yesterday by the United Nations Development Programme. The 2025 Human Development Report says that instead of a sustained recovery following the period of exceptional crisis of 2020-2021, progress has been unexpectedly weak. Excluding those crisis years, the meager rise in global human development projected in this year's report is the smallest increase since 1990. Science has been recognized as a major catalyst for human development. Open science, as put forward by the UNESCO recommendation on open science, is an accelerator to scientific practice and a framework to do science better. It increases scientific collaborations and sharing of information for the benefits of science and society. It makes multilingual scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone, and it opens the processes of scientific knowledge creation, evaluation, and communication to actors in society that are beyond the traditional scientific community. It isn't merely about removing paywalls. It is collaborative and inclusive, allowing new societal actors to engage, if they choose to do so. Today's session convenes experts in participatory scientific methods and practices to discuss the mechanisms through which public contributions and permanent access to scientific discoveries and innovations can strengthen public trust in scientific and knowledge organizations. Their insights and recommendations will be brought forward both in the United Nations High-Level Political Forum this July and in the 4th UN Open Science and Open Scholarship Conference to be held in Tokyo, Japan from 16 to 18 October of this year. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Dag Hammarskjöld Library's website as well as its YouTube channel. It is also governed by the UN Code of Conduct. By joining this event, you are agreeing to abide by this code. Today's session will be offered in English. We apologize that the platform does not provide automatic translation, and we invite you to turn on captions. We have reserved time for discussion at the end of the session. Please add your questions into the chat as they come up. My colleagues are watching that space, and we will collect your questions for discussions at the end of the interventions. Now, without further ado, I want to invite my colleague, Mr. Maher Nasser, who has over 37 years of work experience in the United Nations system, during which he has worked in Amman, Cairo, Dubai, Gaza, New York, and Vienna. As the director of the Outreach Division in the United Nations Department of Global Communications, Maher leads the department's engagement with academia, advertising industry, civil society, creative community, libraries, sports, and football. The Outreach Division that he leads manages public engagement through the UN publications, visitor services, exhibits, and guided tours at the UNHQ in New York, as well as key observances on select and high-profile mandates from the United Nations General Assembly, such as the Outreach Program on the Transatlantic Slave Trade and Slavery and the Holocaust. In addition to serving 3 times as acting Under-Secretary General for Global Communications since 2012, Mr. Nasser led the successful United Nations President at Expo 2020 in Dubai as Commissioner General of the United Nations at Expo 2020. In February 2024, the United Nations Secretary General designated Mr. Nasser as the Commissioner General of the United Nations the United Nations Pavilion at Expo 2025 in Osaka, Kansai, Japan. Maher graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Bizaid University in Palestine in 1986 and obtained a postgraduate diploma in Business Administration from Warwick University in the United Kingdom in 2004. For a life and work dedicated to an advocacy for human rights and sustainability, Maher was awarded an honorary doctorate by Democratization University in the United Kingdom in 2024. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Mahi Nasser.
Well, thank you, Thanos, and thank you, colleagues from DHL, for all the preparations and work to put this together. Behind me is the pavilion, the facade of the United Nations Pavilion at Expo 2025 in Osaka, where I was there last week, but currently I'm in Rome. I'm in FAO, so that has enabled me to actually join you. Otherwise, the time difference would have been 13 hours, and that would be a bit of a challenge. Distinguished colleagues, delegates, participants joining us online from across the world. Good morning to those of you who are in that part of the world. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are. It's my great honor to welcome you to this important discussion on open science and participatory knowledge creation as we work collectively towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I have often believed in science, still believe in science, will always believe in science, because we are where we are because of science. The right to participate in and benefit from science is not just aspirational. It is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in Article 27 to be exact. It is reaffirmed in Article 15 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And the right to knowledge acknowledges that science is fundamental to human progress and dignity. Yet, as 2024 Sustainable Development Goals report that published by the Secretary General in July of every year, last year's report has reminded us that we are only at 17% of SDG targets or that are on track. Progress on about 1/3 has stalled or regressed. There are many reasons for that. These challenges demand not just more science, but more science to science that is open, inclusive, and responsive to diverse needs. Open science represents a paradigm shift that democratizes knowledge creation and dissemination. It transcends traditional boundaries by A, making scientific processes transparent and accessible, B, by engaging diverse participants beyond academic institutions, C, by validating multiple forms of knowledge, including indigenous and local wisdom, and finally, creating pathways for marginalized communities to contribute meaningfully. When we open science, we strengthen its integrity while addressing systemic inequalities in knowledge production. Science cannot function as a public good if the public cannot engage with it. The United Nations General Assembly, in its recent Pact for the Future, adopted in September of last year, emphasized the critical importance of SDG localization. As a Special Rapporteur Alexander Zanataki noted, participation is meaningless if it is not embedded in one's own context and does not integrate people and peoples with their identities, values, aspirations, and resources. Open science provides an essential foundation for local involvement in knowledge generation. It fosters dialogue between scientists, policymakers, practitioners, and communities, particularly those historically excluded from scientific discourse. We see the transformative potential of participatory science in action across multiple SDGs under review at this year's high-level political forum on Sustainable Development Goals in July. In Ghana and the United Kingdom, citizen scientists are monitoring marine litter, directly contributing to SDG 14's indicators on ocean conservation. In Sudan, students, scientists, and fishermen collaborated on UNESCO's environmental DNA expedition, collecting water samples that provide crucial data on marine biodiversity. In Palestine, where water scarcity threatens public health, community members in Kharas used mobile technology to track water quality, generating essential data that advances both SDG 3 on health and SDG 6 on clean water. These are just few examples that demonstrate how participatory approaches harness collective knowledge, fill critical information gaps, empower communities, and create cost-effective solutions to complex challenges. In an era where trust in institutions and media is eroding and misinformation proliferates, participatory science offers a powerful antidote by increasing scientific literacy through direct engagement, building relationships between scientists and communities, creating transparency in research processes, validating findings through diverse perspectives and methods. When people participate in science discovery, they develop deeper understanding and ownership of the results, transforming passive consumers of information into active contributors to knowledge. As we build momentum towards the 4th Open Science and Open Scholarship Conference, this dialogue aims to produce actionable recommendations for scientific institutions to meaningfully engage diverse publics. The challenges before us, from climate change to public health crises to economic stress, mass displacement of people, require the full spectrum of human integrity and cooperation. Open science provides the framework for this inclusive approach, ensuring that we advance towards the SDGs truly no one is left behind, and truly no one is left behind. A different future is possible, and that has been the main message of what we are trying to do in the UN Pavilion at Expo in Osaka. But it requires all of us, scientists, policymakers, librarians, publishers, civil society, politicians, of course, and citizens worldwide, working together to ensure that science serves humanity in all of its diversity. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you to my colleagues for organizing this and for asking me to give opening remarks. I welcome you and bid you farewell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maher, for taking the time to join us and address the opening of this event. We will now move to our first intervention from the series of esteemed panelists that have joined us today, and that is Dr. Salini Diani, who is a principal scientist at the CSIR National Environment Engineering Research Institute, or NERI, in India. She is a visiting scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research, Bogor, Indonesia. She is Asia Vice Chair and Steering Committee member in the Commission on Ecosystems Management of IUCN and Associate UNESCO, the World Academy of Sciences. Salini works on socio-ecological interlinkages following diverse knowledge systems and sustainability science approaches for ecosystem conservation and implementing ecosystem-based approaches. She has been the lead author of the 2 IPBES assessments, the Asia Pacific Regional Assessment on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service and Thematic Assessment on Sustainable Use of Wild Assessment. She is also involved as the lead author for the upcoming Springshed Assessment of ICI Modi, Nepal, and another on forest resilience by IUFRO. She has several peer-reviewed publications to her credit and has been recognized for her work by national and international agencies. Dr. Diani, your floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this very warm welcome, and it's a privilege to be part of this very important side event. As the time allocated to me is 10 minutes, so I'll try to be as brief and as specific on this part related to my experience. Now, I think it's a huge consensus globally, and what Meher also mentioned, that engaging communities, building trust, and advancing open science for localizing and mainstreaming SDGs is very, very relevant. And I'll bring some of the instances and experiences from our work. I think there is no limit to the application of open science to the pursuit of the SDGs, because unless there are people-centric approaches to protect and restore our ecosystems as well as to address climate action, it's very important that we have communities holding hand of scientists, and so that we have more effective outcomes and effective solutions for the larger countries and also the regions. So leaving no one behind is very, very relevant and need of the hour at the moment, because it is the priority at the moment to advance and ensure that by 2030 these SDG and their targets are met. So I'll have been having almost 1.5 decade of experience of working with the communities, and I think that uh, addressing climate impacts or understanding the mega drivers what are leading to the change of ecosystems or affecting the ecosystem health can be seen much better with the lens of how communities are experiencing them on ground. So these participatory stakeholder assessments can help us with more specific driver assessment and developing more more pronounced and effective scenarios for future. So instead of going with the global circulation, I think working with the local circulation models and also understanding local perception become very, very important. And this is something that we have experienced and implemented with our work in mangrove areas, coastal and mangrove areas in India, and also identifying the hotspots where people think their opportunities are and their ecosystem services are. So I think this is also a good way to understand that this can also help us with a more bottom-up approach for strategizing and prioritizing conservation action on ground. So when I say about more appropriate scenarios, that means with the lens of how people perceive changes are happening on their neighborhood and on their surroundings. The scenarios can be more appropriate, long-term as well as short-term scenarios. And this can really help governments and also the bureaucrats in these areas and also implementers for more customized solutions for these areas. So these are some of the examples of mangrove conservation that can help for better blue carbon conservation and also nutrient retention and sediment retention in these areas. Now, one of the important aspects that we have observed in all our work across South Asian countries that we have a very much need of free and prior and informed consent when we go and talk to these communities about their knowledge, about their understanding of what they are doing in terms of traditional and indigenous knowledge systems. But I think we need to move ahead from FPIC to more consensus on where people are on the same platform, same page of what kind of interventions are being planned, what kind of scientific knowledge is being developed. So this can help for more trust building because for like us, they are also humans. So trust building and avoiding a tokenistic approach is very, very relevant. And this can also ensure and inculcate a sense of responsibility and belongingness among these communities where they think they are involved in the entire process of developing these scientific solutions. And this is not just limited to natural areas. Our experience with urban areas where we know that SDG 11 demands that we have more citizen scientists, more citizen supportive initiatives and scientific endeavors in our urban areas to have more sustainable and resilient cities in future. I think this has been a great learning experience for almost a decade for all of us, where different cities and their citizens have been really concerned about the ecosystems, the way they are shaping up, and if they are actually able to withstand the kind of pollution or the kind of changes that are transforming their urban areas. So I think this is one of the important aspects of developing partnership with the citizens to develop more sustainable and resilient solutions for future. One of the interesting examples of working in India where we found that we cannot actually achieve better restoration and climate goals unless we have more people-centric opportunities. So that means if we want to have more people-centric opportunities to be integrated in our planning and also implementation process, this has to include more focus of socioeconomic and biophysical data, and more people-centric opportunities can help policymakers to translate global nature-based solution prioritization for application on ground. So this is one of the interesting examples. And what we found that it's just not science that can find solution for so many of these natural happenings across the world, be it climate change or disaster risk reduction. It's very much important that we endorse scientific hybridization where scientific knowledge as well as traditional knowledge systems come together and best of both can understand and accept the uncertainty of the changing climate and bring more appropriate, implementable, replicable, scalable solutions where communities can be involved right from the planning phase to the implementation phase and also post-restoration monitoring where big data, machine learning, and AI can play a very good role. So these are some of the approaches that we were working scientifically, but we were not just limited to understanding these complexities. We're also trying to implement these solutions on ground. So this is one of the important work that we are doing in Indian Himalayan region in the western central part of Himalaya, where we found and we observed that actually successful strategies have to be co-designed, where communities can come together for not only designing the solutions, creating the solutions, but also implementing them along with the scientists and also managing them and governing them for long-term sustainability. So this is one of the opportunity that we created. We were targeting reduction of forest degradation in the area by understanding women drudgery and addressing women drudgery. And we found that while we are targeting all these aspects, we are actually bringing a lot of co-benefits. And these co-benefits are landslide reduction, slope stabilization, and soil erosion reduction. So we could see that co-creation actually also brings a lot of larger co-benefits for communities. So that means need-based approaches where scientists and communities can work together on long-term plans and goals can be a very effective solution. But in this entire process, I must say that trust building plays a very big role, and ensuring that equitable sharing of benefits also happens in the entire process. While I know as a scientist, open access of publication is very relevant. Our country has been having one nation, one subscription, where high quality research publications for government institutions are provided by centrally paying the subscription charges. So there are about 13,000 journals that are accessible to more than 6,300 government academic and R&D institutions. But I must say the efforts have to be even more, where more financial support should go, so that more private academic and R&D organizations should also get access to it. The another important aspect that we have tried to understand in this 1.5 decade is promoting science in local language. So multilingual approach has been really successful, and people feel that they're more connected to the kind of science we are doing. So if it is in local language, people are more connected, involved, and they have a sense of belongingness to the science that they are creating or the contributions. So be it GIS, participatory GIS or participatory mapping, these kind of local language resources can really play a big role. If I talk about the mechanism, how we can increase public contributions and permanent access to these scientific discoveries and innovation, I see some of these important aspects can be improving on finances, because still for Global South, this is one of the most limiting factor, and the publication and access to science in terms of publication to a larger research group is still not sufficient. Then, of course, multi-sectoral and people-centric approach is something that is already we are working on, and there has to be much more to be done in this area. And then there is a lot of big data generated by citizen scientists, and also in the sphere of natural sciences. So I think this monitoring of big data and using the real better purposing this data is also very relevant, and that's where scientists have to play a bigger role. So the opportunities that are to be created for communities and their involvement has to be of relevance and also of acceptance. So consensus has to be built. There should be some incentives for the communities, where communities feel they are involved and they're getting some benefit out of this knowledge sharing. So that can improve on inclusion. And different government line department, they also need to converge, because sometimes similar kind of activities are being done by different government line department and scientific organizations. So that convergence can also play a very big role. And in this process, I think open science itself is a science where there is a need of a lot of innovations to improve the effectiveness for long-term sustainability of solutions. So if I try to bring some of the concluding actionable recommendations for engaging diverse public in knowledge creation, I think these are some of the ways how we can accelerate the momentum for transformative changes in this sphere. So again, multi-sectoral, people-centric approaches, incentives for the communities and people who are participating. So this can be capacity building, this can be monetary incentives. So it can be both way, monetary and non-monetary support to communities, especially for communities and citizens who are participating in, especially in the countries, in developing and underdeveloped countries. And of course, innovations. This is a major area where we should not undermine the potential of communities. A lot of innovation, climate adaptation strategies can be learned by these communities. So I think this is a a bigger area to further explore and learn to help further mainstreaming and localizing and getting successful efforts in SDGs. And then, of course, one of the gray areas that still needs to be further explored is private sector financing. While there is increasing private sector financing in science gradually, but I think there is more need of this private sector sectoral financing for training, capacity building, and also incentive support to communities to get involved and support scientific initiatives. And on the lines of monitoring, learning, and validation, I think this is a continuous process and communities should be taken as partners in this entire process, not as somebody who are not aware of things. So I think gradually we have learned over the years that there is a lot more knowledge that we are learning and writing about. It's time to make them partners in making more successful initiative in localizing SDGs. So these are some of the recommendations from my end, and I thank you again for your opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diani, for your intervention. I took some notes about the need for more consensus and more citizen science. And I think it's important that, as I see, one of your recommendations that communities need to be involved in all phases of a project, from implementing to governing the project. And of course, it is indeed the case where the Global South is still suffering from the limiting factor that is the finances and availability for that. And I think this needs to be put forward as well. I would like now to move to our next intervention, and that is, we are delighted to have with us today Dr. Monica Ramirez Andreotta, who is an associate professor and distinguished scholar of environmental science with joint appointments in public health and global change at the University of Arizona. She is pioneering new methods in exposure science, identifying community-level resiliences to combat environmental health vulnerabilities, and developing novel communication strategies. She develops and implements programs with and for environmental justice and climate justice communities in the areas of pollution prevention, climate change and environmental sustainability, resiliency, and monitoring. She is the director of the University of Arizona Natural Institute of Environmental Health Sciences Superfund Research Programs Research Translation Core, and oversees 3 co-created community science programs, partnering with environmental justice communities to answer their research questions following a community-first reporting model. Her work has been nationally recognized and honored. Since 2020, she is an associate editor for environmental justice and sat on the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology editorial review board. Dr. Monica Ramirez Andreotta served on the Association for the Advancing Participatory Sciences Board of Directors from 2021 to 2024, and now serves at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Office of Research and Development's Board of Scientific Counselors. Dr. Andreotta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm excited to present here today. Well, just a little bit about me. I grew up in the Arizona-Mexico border region. So if you can see here in this map, I grew up here, right out close to Nogales, Arizona, and I'm acknowledging that under the 1983 La Paz Agreement, we are committed to protecting, conserving the environment within the border region. And under that La Paz Agreement, it's been acknowledged that the border region is 100 kilometers into the United States and 100 kilometers into Mexico. And so growing up in a border town and being of mixed race has really influenced the way in which I approach and do work. You can see here, I'm also highlighting this is my nana or my grandmother, Margarita Ramirez, and also acknowledging my family heritage, as well as the different disciplines that I'm blending to do the work that I'll talk about today. This is no new news to people on this call. We are living in a time where environmental racism is occurring and we're striving for justice. We know pollution is the leading global cause of premature death and disease. Within the United States, it is known that 1 in 4 Americans live within 3 miles of a hazardous waste. And from a public health perspective, your zip code can be more important than your genetic code. And so with this understanding, we know that these conventional methods to address health that focus on the individual are going to fail. So these conventional health intervention and health promotion strategies fail to mitigate the sources of environmental risk for these environmental justice communities because they often addressed health at the individual level rather than the interacting with the relevant social, cultural, and political contexts. And so with this said, we should be all, as I hear today, right, with the other panelists and probably those on this call today, we are all striving for structural change. We want to see the research, the work, create a macro level change, a systemic change to the issues we're seeing today. And so one way that reason why we're coming together is we recognize the power of participatory research. We can see here, this is a list of 15 different terms. There might be more. Highlighting, these are 15 different terms from across academic disciplines coming to the same conclusion. You must be engaging those that are affected by the challenge in the solution generating dialogue. And so we know that we're on the right track by doing participatory research, but we also know that if we do participatory research, we are on the right track towards structural change. And so what I'm going to talk about briefly is just highlighting different work from across my laboratory and taking on a co-created, which we already heard from a previous speaker, this idea of co-designing, co-creation, community science, and I also want to bring in the term equity-centered community design. And so with this, if you think about how do you get started and what does this look like, you can generally take these like 10 steps in scientific research. And so what I'm going to do briefly is like take you on this journey as if you were on this, what this might look like. And so the first 1 through 3, right, this partnership building and defining questions, gathering information and resources, and developing explanations all starts with what we already heard, starts with building trust, meeting people where they are, listening, and operating with cultural humility. So if we come to the United States and then we come into Arizona, we can see here I'm showing you a what's called the United States Environmental Protection Agency's toxic release inventory tracker. You can see that the larger the purple circle, the more release by that facility. And so those big purple circles you see, that's where I'm working alongside community members, because these community members are living near active or legacy resource extraction activities. These are some of the images from across the state of Arizona. This is a quote from a parent talking about what they're experiencing with their child with 2 epileptic children, seeing about kidney disease and lupus. This is another image of something we deal with because we're in the semi-arid Southwest. We have what's called mine tailings left behind. You extract the mineral of interest, you leave behind this flour-like material that readily moves with wind and water and affects neighboring communities. And so what do you think, when you're getting started in all of this, right, you're meeting people where they are, you're operating with that cultural humility, and in this space, you're inviting diverse co-creators. And so in the work that I do, we have co-creators that are from across spaces, right? They're intersectionalities around limited income, historically underrepresented, no college degree, their dominant language might be Spanish, and they might be living in rural spaces. Together, we have come up with these different type of topics and research questions. Are my soils safe? Can I grow food? What is in the indoor and outdoor settled dust? Are there pollutants in the rooftop harvested rainwater? Why is my county have an elevated breast cancer rate? Is it due to metalloids exposure? Are wildfires and subsequent wind and water erosion leading to contaminant exposures? And then how are wildfires ultimately affecting my soil and air quality? So these are, again, this is some of that co-creation and the type of questions community members are bringing to the table and want to research together. One of the big things that we hear a lot is well, how do we engage all of these different individuals? Well, the biggest thing I'm going to highlight right here is engaging and working with what we call promotoras, right? So, being a Chicana, I'm going to say promotora or community health worker. These are knowledge mediators or cultural knowledge brokers, people that are operating as the liaison between the community and your organization or institution. And what we know is that people are non-traditional participants, right? So people with low income, might not have a degree, and might be non-white, are more likely to be motivated by existing relationships with individuals or by addressing a perceived risk. And they're less likely to be motivated by learning for the sake, solely for the sake of learning or contributing to science. So you really want to engage, co-design, and address an issue identified by the community. So these are some of the programs I have: Garden Roots, Project Harvest, Rethinking Wildfires, Floods and Health, and STEAM in Action. designing collection methodologies and collecting samples. We look at food, water, soil, surface soils, like sediment, dust, settled dust. These are some of the beautiful images of the soils and foods in the lab. And then we can think about, I don't have time to talk about all of the analyzing, but one of the biggest things is the interpretation and disseminating results. And so what I'm going to end on is for us to be really thinking about data report back. And so when you're thinking about reporting data back, so you've co-created this program, you've co-generated the data set, you've done your forms that is needed for all of this. About like an analysis of ability to do an analysis or comparison and recommendations on what they can do next. This, as we previously heard, multiple languages is critical. So all of this information is in English and Spanish. You can see these are the different result booklets, hard copies that have been provided to families over the years, but we also have an interactive bilingual website. And so starting kind of the OG back in like what my first kind of community science program was Garden Roots. This is very much around how much people are being what is in their soil, how much can they eat from their garden, and reporting data back and ways of how reporting all the data back, but really framing it in terms of like how much they can eat from the garden based on the arsenic uptake into the edible portion of the plant. This is just another graphic of reporting data back and thinking about explaining and increasing data literacy around how to read the graph. This is, I know, just showing a bunch of stuff because it's exciting to show it here. Rethinking wildfires, floods, and health. We can see here, this has showing you like the list of items that's included in the report back. In this case, we looked at multiple contaminants across soil and dust, and then hosted, created the booklet, created the website, but also hosted data sharing events in the community. With Project Harvest, same style, but you can think about like when we had to design this and give some comparative values, it was very, very important to make sure that we were using comparative values that were relevant to the population. So we were asking people, how do you use your rooftop harvested rainwater? And that informed what the comparative values should be in this study. We also had a, not only did we have this report back through the interactive website and the booklet, but we also incorporated environmental art. This is a ripple effect where I had a Master's of Fine Arts student, Dorsey Kaufman, in my lab. And together we designed ripple effect where basically the chemical concentration or in the water, we converted the concentration into sound waves and just put a tray of water on top of a speaker. And so the water would move at the vibration of the concentration. And if it exceeded a standard or a reference value or a recommended limit, you would see a light go off. You always need to be presenting solutions and recommended best practices to reduce exposures. And so again, with this whole process, you want to make sure you're always providing solutions and actual prevention intervention. I won't go into all this, but the data report back and sharing efforts with Project Harvest was quite elaborate. But what I do want to highlight is when we evaluated and looked at the outcomes of this kind of work, we can see that these community scientists are now water experts, right? This co-created science led to data literacy. It also made pollution visible. It like integrated so they had the current understanding of their environment, right? And so what we did is we saw with this program and all of the report back and co-creation that there was knowledge integration and refining of environmental and pollution science mental models. So again, acknowledging, right, that people are coming in, they're a fund of knowledge themselves, right? They're coming in with a tremendous amount of information and knowledge already, and you're combining and collaborating and piecing new knowledge into that mental model. And so it was very important also to acknowledge that it's their exposure experience, right, that gets perhaps in this experience condensed into one visual symbol on a page, but this data point unleashes an oral history, not about chemical concentrations, but about the injustice that some areas are the dumping grounds of others. We also saw a growing relationship with science. This is a quote from a community member where they're saying, being able to see, participate in something that's at my home, and I see what happens there, and then I get these laboratory results that show exactly what's going on is really valuable. And then if I had any perceptions that's different than what the booklet says, I have to reconsider and say these are the facts. So highlighting that this is an individual, right, in this time where we see so much distrust in science and misinformation, or as our colleagues and the organizers call information pollution, this is where a participant is like, because they're part of the entire process, they're reconsidering, right, and saying, well, these are the facts. So they're incorporating the scientific information that may be into their current mental model. The other thing I want to highlight is that Project Harvest occurred during the pandemic, and we did see, right, we asked a question now during COVID-19, we asked a few questions about trust in science, valuing their project, and participation. And I want to say, and I know I'm running out of time and I'm wrapping up, but this is where one of the promotoras or the community health workers was like, you know what, Monica, you guys have been reporting all this data back at the end of every year. You should ask participants if they're able to interpret pandemic data better because they've been part of Project Harvest and getting their data report back. And sure enough, we saw that we can see here, right, 65%, 41%, and 61% of citizen community scientists indicated that they agreed or strongly agreed with the statements here. So we did see, right, if we look specifically at number 3, that 61% strongly agreed or strongly agreed that the report back and the co-created science improved their ability to interpret the pandemic data. Lastly, just highlighting that in these conversations and focus groups with participants, they were calling the science our citizen science, right? So they're asking how to expand our science. They're seeing that our science has a social responsibility and being a way to respond to systemic and social justice issues. And they're seeing that our science is not perpetuating harm, but it is a solution. And so I'm highlighting this quote because it shows highlights the new culture of science and the efficacy that a participant has in the co-created process. So ultimately, see this data report back as a boundary object, as a way to bridge and link and stimulate dialogue across interested parties, and really just engaging end users and trusted community members in co-creating, and view the report back as a way to connect with existing knowledge and build environmental health data and visual literacy, new relationships to science, and repairing repairing relationships to science with individuals, and then seeing the report back as an opening of the policy and decision-making window. And just a big shout out to the Association for Advancing Participatory Sciences. I can make sure to talk about this during the panel questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adriota, for your intervention, which was very meaningful. I took some notes about, of course, the co-creation and wanting to research together, which I see it echoed already in the second intervention. I think it is important that, as you highlighted, the liaison between community and institution. I think this sounds quite as an important parameter in community science projects. And, of course, the equity-centered community design, I think we cannot hide anymore from words, and interpreting and reporting the results back is, I think, quite important, and we'll make sure to take notes of that in the wrap-up of this event. Thanks again, and I'd like now to move on to our next speaker, our colleague, Mr. Thomas Kasted. Originally the managing director of a publishing house, Thomas Kasted joined the University Library of Southern Denmark in 2008 and was appointed deputy library director in 2013. He is former co-chair of the ECSA Working Group, Universities and Research Organizations, and the LIBER Citizen Science Working Group. He currently serves as the LIBER Executive Board. The LIBER is the Association of Library and Research Institutions of Europe. In 2021, he co-founded the Southern Denmark University Citizen Science Knowledge Center, of which he is now director. The center advocates on citizen science, aims at building strong ties between the library and faculties, while also adopting the role as project managers on a number of citizen science projects in close collaboration with researchers, as well as citizens and other external stakeholders. In connection, Thomas manages and coordinates a number of cross-discipline citizen science efforts, as the center is partnering projects funded by the European Union, such as Horizon Europe, Madame Curie, Interreg Europe, EPIC Europe. He has also led efforts regarding Southern Denmark University Citizen Science Talent Program for master students and teaching of PhD students. Finally, he is general coordinator of LIBER's efforts regarding a series of guides on citizen science for research libraries in collaboration with ECSA and SciStarter. He holds a master's in both history and public governance. Dear Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much for this kind introduction, and thanks for this very important opportunity. And again, thanks for inviting me. I have as you can see, I framed my brief presentation as a call to action for libraries, for in European global institutions. And I think it's very important that we do capacity building around citizen science, which be my main call at the end. Very briefly, because it always strikes me when I am out and having the privilege to present why and what do we mean by citizen science. So please indulge me for 2 minutes. I think in this era we live in, with a number of the things our very good presenters have already said, but with these global wicked problems that are way too big and way too important for one institution, one country, maybe even the UN itself to solve, it's very important that we team up across boundaries, across institutions, because citizen science seems to have the potential to work to solve these. It's not only what I think this review, going back a few years, says that everything from climate change to pandemics, health inequalities, etc., citizen science has the potential to solve these. So I think that's super important. And another thing I find very, very paramount, citizen science to me and to our institution is an umbrella term, because I think it's way too important to have methods, infighting and disagreements over the term. I think we should be as inclusive as possible and look at the problems and work with the communities who can actually work them. Whether we call it an exact form of citizen science to me does not matter as much. It's more that we actually dig into the problems and try to solve them together. And I think also, if we look at this Kloppenborg methodology from 22, so if we see that we have the different kinds of citizen science, where you can say contributory citizen science might be crowdsourcing and collaborative might be more problem definition, and we move up to, I think, what Muki Hackley would call extreme citizen science. I think citizen science is still in some degrees quite superficial, and I think we should work together to try to grow more inclusive, more co-designed, co-created citizen science, as our first two presenters mentioned. Also, very importantly, working at a university, working with researchers every day and working with citizens every day, I think it's very, very important. We as universities, we as libraries, think of that there are more impact than actual academic impact. So this study by Pasiani and all, 2022, shows the different dimensions of impact, meaning that besides scientific impact, we should work for societal impact, be aware that there is economic, political, and most certainly also environmental impact of science and citizen science. So again, just another, why do we want to do this? If we look at what is actual impact or societal impact from this domain of open science, this study from last year by far says that citizen science even outconquers open science to how can we actually achieve that impact. So just a very brief what and why, because sometimes when I'm out presenting, there's a discussion about that. So what I really want to talk about is libraries, or here in this case, research libraries, as enablers of citizen science, something I feel quite strongly about, having worked within the field the last 8 or 9 years. So at SDU, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, we adopted the UN SDGs as our strategy. So while citizen science is a vast and wild field, so to say, what we see citizen science, it's a platform for dialogue between citizens and researchers, and very importantly, reducing the distance in order to encourage a dialogue, democratic-based dialogue on knowledge and facts. So what we did in 2021 was that all these activities we were doing at SDU, at that point we have been doing maybe 15 or 18 citizen science projects, we found out that we wanted to build an infrastructure, a center around citizen science. So when that were to be placed, the faculties and the library decided together that we placed it in the library because this is a neutral ground that ensures that researchers from different faculties get a same sort of service, but also importantly that it's not only for health science or biology or mathematics or social science. We are also trying to root and work for cross-disciplinary research. So at my unit at STU, we work with researchers on one point, and we work with the public at the other point. And what we are doing is that we are offering concrete services to researchers who are well aware that citizen science is the thing, that societal impact is important, but are way too stressed out for their other chores in research to actually conceive this. So we're a library unit that without an extreme amount of competence development for our staff are doing anything from project conception to project management to research data management every day with our researchers, but also critically embedding them in the public domain, making them work together with communities, and also facilitating that dialogue so communities actually get feedback and get results from the data they are putting in. So we have been doing this for a number of years now. We are bordering 40 projects. And I think it's important is that the library facilitation of citizen science at STU has put a reach to around 4 million citizens as we can measure it. And we are not counting the work we have done on Flow TV with media partners. So it's just to say that if we facilitate citizen science as libraries, we can most certainly achieve a high degree of concrete citizen science impact, societal impact, besides the publications that the researchers are aiming for. And my real point here and my beginning of a call to action, and I'm rounding up, is that citizen science do not always happen by itself. Communities are, in my experience, looking for a single point of contact at research institutions such as ours, and researchers, while very knowledgeable in a number of fields, sometimes or most likely need professional facilitation because they are putting on quite a lot of other responsibilities in citizen science. So just last week, I had the good fortune to run into a collaborator, Dr. Egle Budjevicin from Kaunas in Lithuania. So Egle has mapped from her research 6 roles of researchers in citizen science as initiator, facilitator, communicator, mediator, observer, and also as an educator. And I think we as research institutions, governing bodies, maybe even the UN, we put a lot of pressure on our researchers to take on all these roles, and these roles could benefit from professional facilitation, because otherwise, yes, Houston, we have a problem, but the problem might actually grow bigger. So my very simple call to action would be that sustainable infrastructures are in demand and should be supported by libraries, by library organizations, by universities, by university alliances, maybe also by the UN. And I will extend an invitation from LIBA, where I serve on the executive board. I had the very great privilege with a number of very dedicated colleagues around Europe to found the LIBA Citizen Science Working Group. We're a group around 35 libraries who work on a bottom-up basis to grow citizen science, do infrastructures, and do best practices around citizen science. So this is an invitation to libraries, to researchers around the world to team up with us, share knowledge, and maybe we can expand citizen science as a bottom-up approach for everybody. I have a few references, and I humbly thank you for the time you have given me to present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you for your intervention, and I did take a couple of notes, and I particularly like the phrasing libraries as enablers. And I think the libraries are actually, and this is what we are promoting as one parameter in our Open Science Conference that is coming up, that libraries are actually at the core infrastructure for open science and a suite of practice of open science do go through libraries, and I think it's the role of libraries in open science suite of practice is extremely important, and citizen science is actually one of the biggest, I presume. I do take note that you are also in agreement with the more inclusive, more substantive citizen science need and more co-creating and co-designing. And I particularly am a fan of the societal impact of citizen science on open science, and I think all science. But we have one more intervention, and I'd like to move on to our final intervention. And I'm delighted to invite our colleague, Heather Page, who is a statistician in the Sustainable Development Goals monitoring section at the UN Statistics Division. She supports the program on global monitoring of SDG progress, including development and implementation of the SDG indicator framework and the Sustainable Development Goals report. We have already referred to this report several times, and of course, all of our outreach work refers to the SDG reports and the global SDG reports as well. She also serves as part of the Secretariat of the UN Secretariat for the Collaborative on Citizen Data, focusing on qualitative data, impact storytelling, and communications. Previously, she was an environmental affairs officer at the UN Regional Commission Office in South America, ECLAC, and before joining the UN, she worked with communities in Costa Rica and Ecuador. She holds a dual master's in international affairs, sustainable development, natural resources from American University. And without further ado, the floor is yours, Heather.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I am a statistician with the UN Statistics Division. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm really pleased to be here on this panel and hear about the experiences in particular in citizen science. I'm here today to talk about the Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data, as well as the collaborative on citizen data. So this collaborative was launched by the UN in 2023 to promote the systematic collaboration among civil society, national statistical systems, academia, and other relevant producers and users of data, essentially aiming to bring citizen data to the official international statistical community. And so the collaborative is mandated by the UN Statistical Commission, and its main focus has been to develop and finalize the Copenhagen Framework, which I'll get into in just a second, but also to provide a space to share knowledge, resources, and experiences, foster collaborations, as well as provide a platform for advocacy, a mobilization of relevant stakeholders, as well as identify conceptual and methodological gaps for further development of guidance. The group, the collaborative, is governed by a steering committee of 10 different groups, with our office being a current co-chair. So I think it's very clear from this panel, and it's really exciting to hear that citizen contributions to data are increasingly recognized as critical to societal well-being, and their participation along the data value chain is in all aspects, from design, collection, to dissemination and use. And the impacts of having citizen contributions to data include empowering communities in their dialogue with public institutions, addressing intersectional marginalization. We've heard a lot of different examples of that today, holding institutions accountable, as well as ensuring that data remain relevant and impactful. And all of this under the umbrella to truly leave no one behind. However, unleashing the full potential of citizen contributions to data actually faces quite a few challenges. And these include a lack of trust or engagement, which we've also heard about, between state and non-state actors, concerns about quality of data collected by non-state actors, or limited knowledge and capacity of different actors to interact with data, and concerns over sustainability of citizen data efforts, among others. And so the Copenhagen Framework was developed, and it aims to really bring everyone to a shared understanding of citizen data and to create an enabling environment. And it really tries to address these challenges that I just mentioned, but also really leverage the power of citizen contributions to data. It's not the framework is not a how-to guide. It really aims to lay out concepts, principles, and high-level objectives. And so it conceptualizes and defines citizen data. It outlines the roles that citizens and national statistical offices can play in data processes, and also formulates action points for the sustainable production and use of citizen data. And in particular, it's defining the role of national statistical offices, because oftentimes national statistical offices and citizen data historically have not always had strong interaction or strong partnerships. And so this is the space that we work in, and we're trying to bring kind of these two worlds together. So in the Copenhagen framework, there's really key aspects to the definition of citizen data, and I think we've heard a lot about that today. And it's really about sufficient and meaningful participation. The focus is on maximizing both the degree and quality of citizen involvement, and it's not just about contributing data, but about fostering engagement that is truly impactful. And participation also across the entire data value chain. Citizens should be involved at every stage of this, from production to use, collection, publication, uptake, and impact. And this ensures that data reflects diverse perspectives and serves real community needs. So in the framework, the framework has a particular focus on citizen data. And in particular, as I mentioned, citizens meaningfully engaged in the production and use of data. And this could look a couple different ways, where you have citizen data that is actually integrated into official statistics, or citizen data that is quality assured and complements official data, but is not necessarily integrated into those official statistics, or other citizen or community-based data that would remain purposefully independent and outside of official statistics, in particular those that are aiming to hold institutions accountable. And so the framework, we really rely on what exists and learning from countries' experiences to shape future guidance. And the framework allows for adaptation to different contexts rather than prescribing a one-size-fits-all solution. And the framework structure includes, as I mentioned, the concept and definition of citizen data, integrated principles of citizen data, the role of the national statistical offices, what it takes to have an enabling environment for the sustainable coordination, production, and use of citizen data, as well as an implementation roadmap. And so the framework outlines 13 guiding principles to ensure citizen data is collected and used responsibly. And each of the definitions is defined in the text. And some of them I'd just like to highlight. For instance, number 8 on data sovereignty, really respecting local ownership and control over data, especially for marginalized communities, transparency and accessibility, making data processes open, understandable, and available to all. In addition, the framework includes enabling environment to ensure inclusivity, as well as co-creation. I think this is a concept that we've talked about a lot today that is crucial to not only include, but also be the basis for the work. And also the recognition of marginalized voices in data processes. The framework really tries to highlight critical elements needed to foster this environment, such as trust, statistical infrastructure, institutional arrangements, as well as financing efforts. And so the implementation details of the framework, or essentially kind of the how-to, is something that's being developed over the next 2 years through guidelines and materials. And we are currently mobilizing resources and partnerships, not only financially, but also with an open invitation to the public to join as a member of the collaborative, because the collaborative will be developing knowledge products and tools, looking at data quality, meaningful citizen engagement, forming national partnerships, intersectionality, as well as how to build impact stories. The group, or the collaborative, also is advocating for citizen data in different events and major fora each year. We're also partnering with citizen science fora, the Code Data Task Group in particular, as well as qualitative data fora, to really try to bring all of these kind of worlds of knowledge together. And that is also trying to foster knowledge exchange in a growing community of practice. We're carrying out a scoping or a feasibility study for a citizen data platform. And we're also supporting countries in trying to connect local work with also global influence. We're working in Colombia, Kyrgyzstan, Nepal, and Malawi at the moment. The group will also host an expert group meeting in Colombia. And I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with this event, as we would really like to partner more with or on citizen science initiatives and improve our work from the vast experience and knowledge from this community. And here are a few of the ways that you can engage with us or get in touch and connect with us. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Heather, for your intervention. And I think it's really important that we have the comprehensive framework and we have all these definitions and implementations and frameworks, and of course a wider global participation, and especially a participation of the Global South. I would like to move to a couple of questions. We're a little bit over time, so we will, if that is okay with everyone, we'll extend this up to 9:55 New York time, the latest. So I will just, we have a few questions, so I will just select 3 questions of those so we can go through them. One question that we have from one of our participants is, would panelists speak a bit to the tensions between and strategies for addressing the conceptual aim of participant involvement in full processes and the benefits participants gain from taking in these different roles? Co-creation can be a heavy burden for many. So who would you like to go first?
It's an excellent question. In the Copenhagen framework, we actually really push for co-creation because the way that the framework was developed was through a very participatory process as well, and actually gaining from the knowledge and insight from a lot of different citizen data initiatives from different perspectives, from government perspective, from civil society perspective, from academia, citizen science as well. And I think the reason that the push for co-creation is so integral to the framework and to the work that we're trying to promote is that it does have different facets and different definitions and different ways of showing up in different citizen data, but it's still integral and essential. And so in the framework, we're trying to push for ensuring that it's not forgotten, or that at least the aim is still there. So I don't know that there's necessarily an exact way to answer this question. Is it a heavy burden? Perhaps yes. Is it something that we still need to strive for? Absolutely.
Maybe just a brief follow-up, maybe an example. So currently in my unit, we're assisting a health science faculty on a series of pilots in extreme citizen science in health inequality, meaning marginalized Danish citizens that are not having a voice in research. So that proves actually very difficult for these community groups to participate. We have to be super mindful of what they're doing it, but if we want to achieve a real change, there's no way around it. But this also, and in a very, very different sense, can also be seen as a burden for researchers, because not many researchers are familiar with co-creation. Not many researchers, or not all researchers, while having the will and energy and can see the point, don't always have the tools and the stamina to do this. We are asking a lot of very talented researchers here. So the proposition or something actually cuts both ways. And we need to be very inclusive when we do these kinds of designs, both on the citizen science from what we demand, but also aid and assist researchers in having the right tools to reach out.
Thank you. I totally agree with Thomas and what he mentioned. I think it definitely is an additional pressure if you want to co-create, especially implement these solutions on ground, because definitely as scientists, we have a specific job of creating some kind of scientific knowledge and also solutions. But when we start working with the communities, let me also mention it's working with the human psychologies, and they're very, very complex at the moment and the times. So it means a larger time of implementation goes in actually trust building. So if I say that one of the projects that I was showing, it was a 5-year project, and almost 2 years went in trust building and convincing communities what we are doing is for their benefit. It's only after they see the initial results coming and they find they're of benefit to them and they're creating some kind of opportunities, that is when they start getting involved in a big way. So I think, yes, I totally agree with Thomas and also Heather. There needs to be some kind of framework and better facilitation for scientists, how to move better, faster, to achieve that, so that it doesn't look like a burden to scientists. And that's why I think people who do citizen science, they only do citizen science. But scientists, if they want to do citizen science, it's an additional work for them. And then getting the kind of knowledge that you want is also another task. It can be, exaggerated or underrepresented. So how to navigate those challenges is also a task. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to acknowledge, like, from a place-based perspective, I agree with what's being stated. I mean, I have seen people through the projects that I've been doing and others, like, people add to their resume their role in the project to leverage it to for different jobs and for promotions. People use the data to advocate for change and use it to talk to local, state, and federal government agencies for additional monitoring. One big example is, like, the community science program revealed that the local water utility was serving water that was exceeding the drinking water standards for arsenic, as well as a few others. And so community members had their garden roots booklet and went to the state, and then the state retested the wells, retested the facility, retested the municipal facility, and sure enough, it was exceeding the drinking water standard for arsenic. And so you can see these, so these are just some examples of how what the benefit might look like. And then I think one of the things to highlight is to pull from community-based participatory research principles that acknowledge that there's many different ways for people to be participating.
Thank you, Monica. And just my mind went back to Heather's note from her presentation, nothing about us without us. So I think even co-creation does carry a burden, but at the end of the day, I think we need to stick to principles in certain respects. We have another question that I think is quite interesting to keep, because it's sort of like we ground us a little bit with scientific realities, and that is, does the system of assessment of academic work place excessive concentration on writing yet more papers and detract from the societal engagement of science? And what I think can be done about it? I mean, there are many initiatives out there around that, but I think it would be a good idea to hear your expert opinions on that front. And just noting again, this is one of the streams of the conference in Japan on open science and open scholarship. So I'm just going to go around in a different way this time. So I will start from you, Monica.
Yeah, so I would, I would say that we want the public participation in scientific research or co-creation to be valued. We should see that within an academic institution, it should be part of peer review and tenure processes. There should be the dedication to an evaluation on that participants are, or excuse me, researchers are adhering to fair and care data management principles. So I can put links to those studies in the chat. But the other big thing I would also kind of question, or philosophical question or thought, would be, as my colleague Sakobi Wilson stated, like, what is an impact factor, right? So we have these impact factors based on the peer review literature and us citing each other, but maybe we need to reevaluate and redesign an impact factor to incorporate the type of topics and scenarios and outcomes and change we want to see as spoken today.
Thank you for this question. I think this is a very, very important question at the moment. Despite governments and policies want that scientists should focus more on addressing societal challenges on ground. And this is how the countries are now shaping up, and their new education and scientific policies are. And even in India, we all are asked to have more focus on societal challenges and addressing these issues. But at the same time, if you see appraisals, the section on publication is still there, and despite having more focus on these things, these are still valued. So it definitely is still a more powerful space in appraisals, and they're always given consideration, despite we try to ignore that impact factors and number of publications are not going to be very relevant in future. But yes, this is not declining at the moment, and we still have a lot of focus on that. But I think, even publications are very much necessary when new knowledge is created, and many of these scientific organizations and policies are influenced by them. But how to balance both of the thing, it will be very important for everybody to look how there is not more burden on scientists to create everything, to do citizen science, to do impact on ground, to do laboratory science. So this has to be really clearly and very effectively addressed. But yes, the situation is right now the same.
I could probably go on for a whole hour to say how the current paradigm of publishing and academic writing is unsustainable. I think at this point I will say that in order to achieve academic success and tenure and promotion, we are rewarding people to write in academic journals that, a bit provocative, nobody really reads outside of a small core area, and most certainly not provides to solving some of the global wicked problems that we are having. So I would just in this forum say that if we are promoting people based on academic merit, and we should, maybe we should put up other incentives for people who are achieving societal impact, working with communities. So this impact could be more diverse than it is today, because right now we are reproducing a system that doesn't work. I could argue that it's broken, and some of the big wicked problems we're having are only getting worse. So this is not just for this little forum we are here right now. It's also a global academic problem. But we need to think of how to build in inventives for researchers to work with societal impact.
I don't actually work in this space necessarily, so I'm not sure that I can necessarily give an opinion, although all of that sounds very, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think, at least for governments and working with citizen data, a lot of the issues is on quality. And what we're really trying to do is try to collaborate more. We're really trying to open up those conversations and address the quality issues so that the conversations can actually take place between citizen communities and official data providers and the official data ecosystem, so that community issues can be addressed at all levels.
Thank you very much, Heather. And definitely, I understand the perspective of the United Nations Statistics Division and the work on data, and how important that is through the Copenhagen framework. I think we have time for one last question, and I'd like to bring it back to one of the major policies of the organization. So, and I think hopefully it will give our speakers a minute to wrap up, because it is a little bit of a generic question. So Article 30 of the Pact for the Future, that also Maher Nasser mentioned at the opening of this event, commits us to ensuring that science, technology, and innovation contribute fully to the enjoyment of human rights, particularly by empowering those in vulnerable situations to meaningfully participate. And I stress on meaningfully. Against this backdrop, how can open science practices, especially citizen science and participatory research, be scaled and institutionalized to not only democratize knowledge creation, but also address the systemic barriers that limit access, participation, and equity in scientific process? What are the practical steps that research institutions, funders, policymakers must prioritize to make this ambition real? I'll start from my colleague Heather, who I'm sure works a lot around the Pact for the Future with these items.
Yes, I mean, this ends up touching on so many different topics,
exactly.
As far as big data, open data, yes, disaggregation. We want to, the SDGs were incredible in the sense that they opened up the data ecosystem in countries completely. But this was not necessarily an easy task for the statistical systems in countries. So over the last 10 years, we've really seen a progression of the data ecosystem in countries slowly but surely opening and becoming much more inclusive. We still have a long way to go, but what we're trying to do with the Collaborative on Citizen Data and with the framework is really provide the language between the citizens on the ground, academia, and government to all come to the table and really have the discussions about how they can move forward and implementing and actually trying to progress on the SDGs and throwing all of the different aspects and elements together, essentially. I mean, this is not an easy task by any means, but what we're trying to do is provide the space and the enabling environment so that we can move forward. And I think the Pact for the Future and all of the prescriptions in that are just another tool for us to try to really push the boundaries, and so that the data ecosystem remains wide, even and grows even wider, but that we maintain our our goal of really leaving no one behind and trying to progress on the SDGs, because the truth of the matter is the SDGs take place at the local level, at a personal level, and that's what all of the data says anyway. What we really want to do is bring that data down to that local community so that it really is at the forefront.
Thank you very much, Heather. Thomas, it was a long question. Just to repeat, what are the practical steps that research institutions, funders, and policymakers must prioritize to make this ambition real, the ambition of elevating citizen science and equity scientific process and institutionalize it?
I will go very briefly back to my call to action, which is a joint responsibility. It's not one single entity that has this responsibility. It's about incentives and infrastructure. Citizen science do not always happen by itself. I think our unit today is a living proof of that. And other very good libraries around Europe and also in the US and most certainly also beginning in the Global South are supporting this. But it's a very bottom-up approach. It's a very bottom-up proposition. Any help, aid will be beneficial to doing this and take stress off researchers to do an even more great job than they're doing currently.
Thank you, Thomas. Shalini?
Yeah, I also agree, and I think more structured approach is required to be in citizen science at an institutional level. If you see presently, even in many of these Asian countries, it's not very formal approach of addressing and integrating citizen science. So I think a more regularization, structuring is required. And when I see now these insights coming from library experts, librarians, so I think that also required. That's where we are really having a big gap at the moment, where our libraries are really not in the process of supporting this entire process. And that's the major burden at the moment. And at the same time, also see that financial support is also required, while still half of the scientific community thinks that, a larger group thinks that citizen science generated data is not so relevant and not so important. But at the same time, I see this our larger group, where I see the citizen science data actually provides you a larger baseline and the spatio-temporal changes happening. And this is very important for some of the strategic decision making. So I think more formalization, structuring, and support is required in the process to strengthen it further.
Thank you very much. And Monica?
I'm just in agreement with everything that's been said, and maybe I would highlight, like, thinking at the intrapersonal level with individuals is recognizing, right, like the level of self-efficacy and efficacy within the individual. I think in the experiences I have, people feel like they have to make a decision between environmental health and a job or economic gain. And I hope I believe that we can have both, and we know we can have both. And so I would say, like, starting with intrapersonal and growing someone's sense of efficacy together, and recognizing that the diversity at the table of decision making and informing the project allows all of us to leverage our current funds of knowledge in these efforts to create the change we want to see.
Thank you very much, Monica. We are already 2 minutes beyond 9:55 New York time, so I want to express my gratitude to our speakers for joining us today and shared their expertise and their insights. I want to express my gratitude to everyone that connected online to attend this session. I want to send another invitation to everyone to please join us for the event the United Nations Headquarters Library is going to design for the High-Level Political Forum, and of course the Open Science, the United Nations Open Science and Open Scholarship Conference in October in Tokyo, Japan, where we touch upon several aspects, some of which have already been surfacing today. Again, our thanks, and citizen science, go forward. Thank you very much.